Welcome to another episode of Retrowbacks, where I take a look at some classic games often considered retro, or at least one or two console generations older than the present one, and assess if it held up and is still good enough to play in this day and age. I will review the game based on its graphics, sound, and fun factor, the latter of which is affected by gameplay, controls, and overall appeal of the game using a rating scale of 1 to 10, where 10 being the absolute best for its generation, while 5 is mediocre, or in the language of kids nowadays,
Amen.
and anything below that is pretty much garbage. At the end, I will also give an overall score, which is the aggregate of the other ratings, unlike in the past, where I just give an arbitrary rating for the game before I came up with this system. In this episode, I will be discussing The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. A Link to the Past is the third game in the Legend of Zelda series, which was released in 1991 in Japan and 1992 for the rest of the world. Chronologically, the story is set after Ocarina of Time and the branch where the hero fell, and it took place before its sequel, A Link Between Worlds, and the two NES Zelda games. I know I was supposed to play this chronologically story-wise, but since I finished the first two Zelda games and played another 2D Zelda game in Four Swords, I just felt like playing this before diving into the 3D masterpieces, and I didn't want my eyes to be spoiled by the better 3D graphics while I still have a 2D streak going on. With that being said, let's get into the story first, because I'm a story kind of guy and I enjoy delving into a game's lore before, during, and even after playing the game. According to the Hylian scrolls, the mythical gods descended from the heavens to the world and created order in life. The god of power created land, the god of wisdom created science and wizardry, and the god of courage created life. After the gods had finished their work, they left the world, but not before creating a symbol of their strength, a golden artifact known as the Triforce. A small but powerful portion of the essence of the gods was held in this mighty artifact, which was to guide the intelligent life on the world of Hyrule. Although it was an inanimate object, the Triforce had the power to bestow a person who obtained its great powers, beckoning people to seek it in the hope that someone worthy would find it. A verse from a collection of Hylian legends and lore called the Book of Mudora made the Triforce even more desirable. In a realm beyond sight, the sky shines gold, not blue. There the Triforce's might makes mortal dreams come true. Many aggressively searched for the wish-granting Triforce, but no one, not even the Hylian sages, was sure of its locations. The knowledge had been lost over time. That yearning for the Triforce soon turned to lust for power, which in turn led to the spilling of blood. Soon the only motive left among those searching for the Triforce was pure greed. One day, quite by accident, a gate to the golden land of the Triforce was opened by a gang of thieves skilled in the black arts, and after a long battle, the leader stood triumphant over the Triforce and grasped it with his blood-stained hands. His roaring laughter echoed across time and space, and even reached the far-off land of Hyrule. The name of this king of thieves is Ganondorf Dragmar, aka Manrag Ganon, which means Ganon of the Enchanted Thieves. In time, evil power begins to flow from the Golden Land, and greedy men were drawn there to become members of Ganon's army. Black clouds permanently darken the sky, and many disasters beset Hyrule. The Lord of Hyrule sent for the 7 wise men and the Knights of Hyrule and ordered them to seal the entrance to the Golden Land. Suspecting that Ganon's power was based on the Triforce's magic, the people of Hyrule forged a sword resistant to magic which could repulse even the powers granted by the Triforce. This mighty weapon became known as the Blade of Evil's Bane, the Master Sword. It was so powerful that only one who was pure of heart and strong of body could wield it. As the 7 sages searched for a valiant person to take up the Master Sword, Ganon's evil army swarmed from the tainted Golden Land into Hyrule and attacked the castle. The sages and the knights of Hyrule combined forces to wage war on this evil horde. The knights fought courageously, but many were lost that day. Finally, the seven sages sealed Ganon and the Golden Land, and all of Hyrule rejoiced at the victory. This war became known as the Imprisoning War in stories told in later centuries. Many centuries have passed since the Imprisoning War. The land of Hyrule healed its wounds and the people lived in peace for a long time. In time, memories of the vicious war faded over the generations, so it is no surprise that no one was prepared for the new disasters that have recently struck Hyrule. Pestilence and drought, uncontrollable even by magic, ravaged the land. The king of Hyrule, after counsel with the sages, ordered an investigation of the imprisoned Dark World, as the Golden Land had come to be known. But the wise man's seal was apparently intact. He offered reward for anyone who could find the source of these troubles. In answer to these summons, a wizard named Aghanim came and quelled the disasters with a previously unseen form of magic. As a reward, the king gave him a new position as chief advisor and heir to the seven sages. Peace returned to the land. However, this was short-lived as the wizard Aghanim wrested the power from the king and now rules the country with his magic, and the people of Hyrule were gripped by dread. And this is where your quest begins as Link, when a girl's voice awakens you from your sleep. As you can see, the storyline of A Link to the Past is far more elaborate than the previous two Legend of Zelda titles, and even a bit more than other later titles. Now let's get into the meat of this review. The graphics. The good thing is Nintendo learned from their experiences from the previous two games in the series and ditched that janky side-scrolling presentation of Zelda 2, leading to them perfecting the Zelda formula with this game and stapled how the 2D Zelda games would look like. The game world this time was definitely larger than the previous two games, containing over 12 dungeons and 2 versions of each area of the overworld due to the dual world feature. The game was also the first in the franchise to have a real, tangible art style. Sadly, this art style did not transfer well to pixels from paper due to limitations with the colors that can be used. Case in point, Link's pink hair, because he turns into a pink rabbit in the Dark World, and it begs me to ask game developers, why not just change the rabbit into yellow one instead? Why keep the pink hue sacrificing the main character's hair color just for a forgettable bunny transformation that has zero value to the game experience? I couldn't even stand seeing Link with pink hair when in the manuals and official art he is clearly blonde, so I patched the game in my SNES Classic Mini to reflect the actual colors of character that includes Link's uncle and Aghanim. Now the background is noticeably improved over the NES games, but I wasn't impressed with the sprite work done by Nintendo for this game. These chibi-style sprites were just a small improvement over the first Zelda's 8-bit sprites and are inferior to its contemporaries, especially those within the Super NES's library of role-playing games which also incorporate the chibi style. And this is coming from a guy who spent more time gaming during the 16-bit generation than any other gaming generations. For me, the first Zelda game had more appeal graphically, just like the first Super Mario Bros. Game, which can't be faulted for their looks, since those were products of their time, where in this case, I would dare say A Link to the Past is one of the ugliest 16-bit graphics I've seen in my life. And I was a Sega fanboy who knew that SNES was a more powerful system. As it stands, the best looking 16-bit Zelda game for me remains to be the Minish Cap. Just look at that multiple frame buttery smooth animation. Graphics is 3 out of 10. If it weren't for the fog effects and Mode 7 map, this would have been lower. Sounds. Koji Kondo was back in the helm and all is well in this game's audio department. In fact, A Link to the Past established the musical core of the Zelda series, further proof that the music in this game is timeless. While the first game originated the Hyrule Overture for the overworld, many recurring themes of the Zelda score came from this game, including Zelda's Lullaby, Ganondorf's theme, Hyrule Castle, or otherwise known the Royal Family theme, Kakariko Village, and Fairy Cave, or otherwise heard during the select screen. I also appreciate the little nuances added to the game, like the echoes inside the caves or the ambient sounds in the overworld. The music and sound is so perfect, memorable, and probably the best thing about this game. Enough said, 10 out of 10. And finally, fun factor. Reverting to an overhead perspective similar to that of the first Zelda game, it is a definite improvement for the gameplay, as is Link's sword attack, which was improved to swing in a 90-degree angle instead of merely stabbing forward. Though Link can now move diagonally, he still faces only 4 sides when slashing with his sword or shooting from afar with his bow, magic rods, or when throwing bombs. So combat is still far from perfect control-wise. I admit Nintendo had narrowed down what had made the first Zelda game such a success and expanded upon it to make this game a trendsetter not only for the rest of the series, but for the action-adventure genre. And though considered a masterpiece and probably made gamers addicted to it back in the day, it failed to hold my interests, to make me want to sit down and play this every chance I get. I even prefer to play other games in my spare time that don't even have stories, like Monster Hunter, and I'm talking about 3 Ultimate here, not even the superior 3DS game like 4 Ultimate or the new Monster Hunter Rise on Switch. And again, I'm the story guy here. I prefer games with good narratives. I remember exactly when that happened during my A Link to the Past playthrough. It was after rescuing the third maiden, and I began thinking that I had to rescue all 7 of them after I've already rescued Zelda and then rescue Zelda again at the end. It felt that there were too many unnecessary padding to the game, and I was thinking that this gameplay experience would have been better if there were only 3 or 4 maidens to be rescued. I didn't feel this way while playing both Minish Cap and the first Zelda game, maybe because both were short, sweet, and were only as long as necessary. You might argue that those additional dungeons would reward you with items or weapons that you would need, but what I would ask you, did you really need all those dungeon items at endgame? I remember that I only used the Master Sword and the Silver Arrows to finish off Ganon. Then some would say, those extra paddings were necessary for the story. But ask yourself, were they really? Does rescuing 7 maidens add something important to the narrative compared to just rescuing 3 or 4? After rescuing each one, they just remind me of those toads that will tell you that the Princess Peach was in another castle in Super Mario Bros. Were the dungeon bosses the best reason to pad the gameplay with rescuing all 7 maidens? Nope. Most of the bosses were forgettable, and the only memorable boss for me was Blind, because her transformation from the woman you rescued was so out of left field. The mark of a truly excellent game is when you desire to replay it after you've already finished it. I finished the first Zelda game twice and the Minish Cap 3 times, finally getting it to 100% completion on my 3rd try, so that's a testament of how good those 2 2D Zelda games are. This game I have no desire to play again. I just felt tired finishing this game that I didn't even care to complete all hard pieces. In the end, was it fun to play at all? Kinda, but barely. Just barely for me. 6 out of 10. So overall rating 6.3 out of 10. Not the masterpiece as other publications or nostalgic gamers would rate it, but hey, I am rating this as a first-time player in this current age where there are already a lot of competition in the gaming scene, unlike in the time this game came out where gamers would get several months of focused gaming for a title before the next big game comes out. With that being said, would I recommend this game to new gamers? No, honestly. It simply didn't hold up, not in the graphics nor the fun factor departments. Old gamers, especially those with their nostalgia glasses on for this game, would still find enjoyment, but I would suggest that newer gamers wait for the remake and play that. Hopefully it gets a Link's Awakening treatment in a few years, if not on the Switch, then on the next gaming system. Or Nintendo could do a Resident Evil 2 or Final Fantasy 7 and rebuild this game from the ground up. You can bet on me playing that. Thanks for watching, and on the next Retrowbacks episode, time to get into something lighter and faster as I buckle up for F-Zero.
Don't forget to subscribe!